Hi, my name is Adam Dreyfus. I am the Technical Assistance Associate with Virginia Commonwealth University's Autism Center for Excellence.
And I'm Kristen Herman, Exceptional Education Coordinator with Henrico County Public Schools.
And thanks for joining us here on this webcast. We're here today to talk to you about a project that we have both been participating in as part of the partnership with the Autism Center for Excellence and Henrico County Public Schools. It is the creation of a transition document that will help inform the IEP process as the IEP teams sit down and try to figure out what is the least restrictive environment for a student diagnosed with autism. So the first sort of piece that we were kind of looking at is just to define transition off the top. Paul Wayman has an excellent definition of it in the broadest scope. The life changes, adjustments, and cumulative experiences that occur in the lives of young adults as they move from school environments to independent living and work environments. And this is your pretty classic definition, that as the students transition from school into the workplace and school and home environments outside of school, are they prepared for it? What this document captures is not that process, though. This document is interested in the transition between classrooms, between schools, inside of the school division. Henrico County Public Schools is a very large school division. It consists of 70 schools, 46,000 students. So as a team sits in an IEP meeting, there's a lot of different choices from self-contained to inclusion to general education that are options on the table. And part of this process was coming up with a document that helped to inform that process and look at skills, some of the soft skills that might not be considered in your traditional transition formats. So one of the things that we know before we even started this process is that a lot of the long-term transition outcomes for students diagnosed with autism are not so great right now. More than 80% of adults diagnosed with autism between 18 and 30 still live at home. The unemployment rate for people diagnosed with autism is above 80%. And we're living in a time where the numbers are sort of working against us. We've got 500,000 children right now in public schools who are going to be aging out over the next decade and are going to need jobs and be able to participate in their home lives and find friends and participate in their communities. So it's incumbent upon those of us working in this field and the school divisions to prepare these children as much as possible for this and to give them the skills just beyond the reading and writing that will help them be successful. So the genesis of this project and where it all began was about 3 years ago when VCU-ACE, the Autism Center, was first came together and we sent out an application to all of the school divisions in the state. It was a competitive application process, seeing who wanted to participate in a 3-year-long grant to embed technical assistance with them, form a partnership, and try to improve the service delivery for students with autism across an entire school division. Henrico County Public Schools put together a very competitive application and was one of the 12 school divisions selected. And 3 years ago, the Henrico County Public School team came together with the Autism Center for Excellence, and we began working on the service improvement plan.
So when we began working on the service improvement plan, we started out by meeting with all stakeholders. We met with parent groups, we met with teacher groups, and just all the stakeholders involved to sort of gauge where we were at with our services for students with autism and then develop some goals based on that. So we did some assessment and utilize that to come up with a service improvement plan and outline some goals. So given that we have, I think as Adam said, 70 some schools in the school division serving students with autism, we felt that transition was a critical piece for us because we have students that transition from preschool to kindergarten, elementary school, and then to middle school, and transitions sort of happen all throughout their school career. So given that we had students transitioning across levels and between schools, this was a really critical piece for us. So based on that, we developed this goal to have effective transitional procedures to support students with autism from the time they're identified through the time that they exit us.
So we were tasked with looking at what can we create, what kind of documentation, what kind of processes, what kind of infrastructure can we build to support those students from when they come into the system all the way up through that kind of final transition out into the workplace. At about the same time as we were kind of coming together on that goal, Henrico County Public Schools decided that they were going to use the VBMap assessment on some of their younger students diagnosed with autism. This is a fairly new assessment in the overall field, but it is used by most of the counties in the Richmond area. It is used by all of the private placements and has really become a popular assessment tool for students diagnosed with autism. It helps to capture, again, a lot of those skills that your more traditional assessments sometimes don't pick up around social skills and the different types of ways that these kids can communicate, whether it's through pictures or through pointing at things, or do they have good listener skills. The VBMap is kind of anchored around a milestones assessment. So this is a pretty straightforward assessment, not altogether different than your traditional psychological exams like the Brigance or even the Vineland that looks at the different skill levels. So what you're looking at there on the screen now are the different levels, and I'm bringing up now level 1 of the VBMap. And again, it's a pretty straightforward assessment tool where you're trying to determine what level the student is at in their play skills, their matching skills, their social skills, their ability to use spoken language, their ability to request items. Not as well known and not as well used is another element of the VBMap. It's called the transition scoring form. There's 3 main parts to the VBMap. The milestones, which you just saw. There's a barriers assessment, which sort of looks at what's preventing the child from being successful at a specific skill. And then there's the transition guidance document. We're going to look at that in a little bit more detail, so I'm going to zoom in on it. And it is broken up into 3 sort of distinct blocks. And as you can see, the first couple of boxes there just kind of pull together scores from different parts of the assessment. But as you move across that top row, we start looking at negative behaviors and what kind of instructional control that we have. How well does the child follow classroom routines? What's their level of social skills and social play? How well do they work independently? The second row looks at generalization. How well do they take a skill that's been taught in the classroom out into the school and into their community? What different types of reinforcement work to help motivate the child? How quickly do they acquire skills? Do they hold on to those skills? Or do you see a fair amount of regression? Can they learn in a natural environment, or do they only learn successfully in very specific ways? And the third row looks at self-help skills, how adaptable they are, and how well they can redirect themselves. So do they engage in a lot of spontaneous behaviors, like we see with students in this population? Do they run around the room? Do they clap their hands? Do they just start singing songs off of television shows? How well do they do during free time? If the teacher says, all right, we're going to take a little bit of a break, can they engage in appropriate behavior without a lot of adult direction? And of course, the big ones, their toileting skills and their eating skills can be big determiners of what kind of placement is appropriate for that student. So we looked at this as part of the overall looking at VBMap and used this as kind of our guidance document and took this out into the school division and met with teachers at every grade level from pre-K to elementary to middle school and high school and got their feedback and put together the, well, this slide is sort of, I'm just showing you again the overall goal that we are working on, which is to have effective transitional procedures. And this is the detail of the service improvement plan that we put together a few summers ago here in Richmond, working with Henrico County Public Schools. We're going to come into that in a little bit more detail. And so you get a sense of how this plan was structured and how the goals were set up, and broken up into subcategories. Specific people were assigned to each part of this. We had dates that things had to be assigned by, completed by. So you'll see this is strategy 1 on the screen. And we had to develop transition criteria for the various schools from preschool to elementary, middle, and high. And we compiled some data, and some of these goals are related to bringing that data together. And we also had to, towards the bottom there, you'll see review meetings with parents and professionals to address what criteria is needed. It was important to discuss this plan with all of the stakeholders in Henrico County. And strategy 2, where we're about, I would say, halfway through currently. We have piloted this document that we're going to show you here in a second, and we've done some fidelity checks. And I wouldn't say it has not been fully implemented yet, but this fall will be used in many schools to help inform this process. So what you're seeing on the screen now is the first draft. And one of the reasons we wanted to make this webcast was to talk to you about the process, about how this document came to fruition over a fair amount of time, working with a lot of different people in a lot of different schools, and sort of take you inside the nuts and bolts of what the Autism Center's partnership with some of the school divisions looks like. So again, this reveal that you see is our first effort to start to take these different skills and put them in a visual format so that people can use it in their meetings. So we put this together, and then we went out and met with pre-K, elementary, middle, and 2 high schools. And what we got back, the feedback we got back is they weren't very happy with this document at this point. It was too much information. It wasn't laid out very nicely. They couldn't figure out how to score it. Those of us who were intimately involved with it were a little saddened at this point because we thought we'd put something together nicely, but that's part of the process. You're not going to be successful sometimes with your first draft. So we did focus on independence and self-help. One of the things that came back repeatedly was what is a determinant for where these kids are going to be placed are how independent are they and what are their self-help skills like. So we knew that we had to focus on that. That was what teachers told us, that's what parents told us, administrators, that these were big determiners. So what you're looking at now is our second draft. We've taken all of those skills and put them in a column, a single column down the left-hand side, and assigned a scoring rubric to each one of those skills, 1 through 5. So we're going to zoom in really quickly. We've got a copy of the guidance document right here, so you can see what it looks like. So as you zoom in, you'll see the first one is works independently. That's one of the more crucial skills we've got, and you'll see how as a teacher or somebody on the IEP team has the document in their hand, that top page, the one you see here, opens up and you have exactly what the scores are and exactly what the definition of works independently is. And we have that for each one of the targets. So this is communicate wants and needs. So we're going to look at the secondary guidance document. 2 documents were put together here in Henrico, one for pre-K and kindergarten, and one for kind of middle school and secondary schools. So what we're going to look at next for the rest of this presentation is the secondary schools guidance document. And we're going to look at what the skills are and how we go about scoring those and defining those. So the first skill that we look at is how well does this student work independently? Are they able to work independently on novel academic tasks and assignments for X amount of time? And you can see the scoring guide there as it goes down. So a score of 1 would be the student cannot work independently at all on novel tasks, and that student by definition would require one-on-one support and hand-over-hand support. And as you move down the column, 1 to 10 minutes, 10 to 25 minutes, and finally a score of 5 will be 40 or more minutes, and that's a student on the spectrum who will be able to work independently on a novel academic task for 40 or more minutes. And that it brings you up into the range of the general education setting. and what more typically developing kids, the expectations that schools have of them, and the length of time that they can work on academic tasks.
So again, tying into that independence piece within a classroom, we looked at the student's ability to choose and engage in non-academic activities in the classroom, so that, you know, if they finished an assignment early, they could choose something and then they weren't disturbing other students or other things going on in the classroom. And again, we just used that Likert scale, 1 to 5, 1 being 0 minutes and 5 being 7 or more minutes.
This is definitely one of the bigger challenges that a lot of our students on the spectrum have, is that unstructured time, that whether you call it break time, whether they're waiting in line for something, whether the teacher has to step out of the room to get copies of something, that ability to just manage that unstructured time. I know that Chris and I have been in many classes where that lack of structured time is one of the biggest impediments the students have to being able to participate fully in your less restrictive environments. It's something that there's not a lot of assessments capture that. Like, how well does this kid do if somebody's not asking him to do something? Most of the kids do pretty well with a one-on-one and somebody guiding them around a school. Mm-hmm. But what do you do when you get to the lunchroom and you have to wait 10 minutes for your turn because there's 3 classes ahead of you at lunch, and so all the kids have to wait 10 minutes? How do you manage that time in a classroom? Maybe you're working on a project and you're done with it early, but you have to sort of wait while the other kids finish it up. That's one that we spend a lot of time trying to help support teachers with visual schedules and timers to help out with, and I think it's a really important piece to try to capture as we kind of look at these kids.
And a skill that we often see on the students' IEPs,
right? That is
waiting or choosing an activity.
One of the and I think it was you were the one who said this to me, is that as we've piloted this out, one of the pieces of feedback that we've received from teachers who started using this is that it helps them think of the skills that their students need to be successful in the next year, and they can build in opportunities for the students to work on those while they have them. And it even helps inform the IEP writing process. So they'll be like, you know what, I'm going to put this in as a goal because it's clearly going to be very important. And I wouldn't have really thought about that as an IEP goal, but I'm definitely talking up this version of the document, because this is the one that's gotten a lot of really good feedback, and I think we're pretty close to kind of a final document at this point. The next skill that we look at is skill acquisition. This speaks to how much repetition does the student need to acquire skills? How many times do they have to go over it? We know in general education settings there are pacing guides, and those classrooms tend to move along pretty quickly. And that you can have a lot of the academic skills and even some of the social skills to participate in a general education class, or even some of your inclusion classrooms. But if the pace of instruction is too fast for you as a student, it can really be hard for you to be successful in that classroom. So we're trying to capture with this one, how quickly does the student learn? Can they learn at the same rate? How much support do they need? Do they need a little bit of support, a lot of support? So that's another one that is not traditionally looked at, but can be a big impediment to a lot of our students' success in less restrictive environments.
So along those same lines, as they take in information at the rate that they take it in, but also sort of what setting do they take that information in best? Do they benefit from a whole group instruction, or do they need a smaller group of students in order to learn new information? Does that need to happen in a one-on-one situation, or can that happen in a larger group setting? And so that was another thing that we looked at, was their benefit from group instruction, and another thing that we often see students struggle with.
This speaks to a lot of the different issues, almost all coming together in one place with staffing and how much support they need and how much kind of hand over hand do they need. And it's one of those situations that can be hard to break, especially if kids are really used to a lot of direct instruction or a lot of one-on-one, fading out that level of support. there's emotional ties to that. There are academic reasons, but having a kid be able to go from requiring a one-on-one or even very small group instruction to groups of 7, 8, 10 is a huge determinant of it just opens up the range of classrooms that they can be successful in. And I think is one of the things is as educators we really struggle with is how to take those kids who can be really successful in the one-on-one and make it so that they can access the materials and those opportunities in larger and larger settings. So the next skill that we looked at as being very important for the IEP team to consider in different types of placement is accepts redirection. This is one that pops up on a lot of IEPs as a goal under the behavior goal, and is one of those soft skills that is one of the ones that comes up with our population almost as much as any other population, is that ability to accept redirection from adults, from teachers, from paraprofessionals, and from other students. This can frequently end up with meltdowns and big upsets, and that can unfortunately be a determinant of what type of least restrictive environment the student ends up in. So again, we have basically a 5-point scale that looks at not only how well do they accept redirection, but even if they do have some kind of inappropriate behaviors, how quickly can they pull themselves back together? Is it a minute or so, which is usually fairly manageable, or does the resistance, non-compliant behavior, upset behavior last 15, 20 minutes, an hour? Does it involve property destruction? These are a lot of questions that get asked around the IEP tables, and we wanted a way to kind of capture the student's skill in that specific area.
So another skill that we looked at was the student's ability to communicate their wants and needs. And communication, I think, as we all know, is one of the ways that autism really impacts students. And so that was important for us to look at. And we look at, do they require some sort of assistive technology to communicate? Are they able to vocally communicate? Do they use pictures to communicate? And are they able to communicate even their basic wants and needs, because that's a critical skill to have in that classroom setting and in life in general. I think as they transition out, to be able to go and say, I need to use the restroom, I need a break, I need, whatever it may be. And so that was another piece that we looked at, and a very, very important piece of this.
A lot of times, a lot of the behaviors that we see in the classrooms with students diagnosed with autism that are related to tantrums and upsets and non-compliance are considered autistic behaviors, or behaviors that are related to autism. And in our experience, those behaviors are almost exclusively due to an inability to effectively communicate. That the behaviors that are associated with autism are those repetitive behaviors, like looking at a fan, spinning a tire, lining up cars, and that those behaviors that are unfortunately more often associated with autism, tantruming and upsets, are more closely tied to their communication skills. We're still at a point where that is not always the first thing that people look at. So we wanted to have embedded in the document, does this kid have a way of communicating to us? Can he let us know when he's upset, or when he wants something or she wants something? I think it's a really crucial piece in working with this population with teachers to make sure it's in place, because it helps control a lot for a lot of those behaviors that we see. In talking to a lot of the stakeholders, including parents, support groups, teachers, paraprofessionals, one of the things we wanted to make sure was in this document was what level does the student require help with their basic self-help skills, whether that's toileting, hygiene, feeding. We wanted to make sure we captured the proper level of support. Are they fully independent? Do they require some support? Do they require extensive support? Few things are kind of a more powerful determinant of less restrictive environment than toileting, unfortunately, at this point, and especially by the time you get to middle school and high school. If the student still requires a lot of support in that realm, it's going to be a powerful guide for what type of environment they can be successful and just hygienic and safe in.
Mm-hmm. And I think while we wanted to consider a student's self-help skills, we did recognize that we do have some students that have some great abilities, and that this didn't necessarily need to be the determining factor in considering their placement. And so it's one piece of this, but it by no means is the determining factor.
Well, and I think something that we talked about as part of this process and is built into the service improvement plan is this document in its entirety is not determinative. It's not like the student will get a specific number or a set of numbers and you say, oh, that means you have to go to that class. It's a guidance document, and it's meant to guide the conversation and not to be the final determiner of placement. The final determinant is always the IEP team in its entirety, with the parents, with the student, with with all of the professionals involved making the final determination. This was just a way of trying to identify some of those softer skills or more generalized life skills that don't always get captured in the IEP process, as a way of helping bring the frame the conversation.
And it may be that hopefully the team gets to that conversation, and if it is a student that needs some help with some self-help skills, sometimes that comes out, I know, in middle school and high school when the kids start to go to gym class and they need, maybe it's not something that is going to affect the placement of that student, but that we can make some accommodations for in that part of the IEP.
And make sure that we explicitly teach
those skills, yes. So another skill that we looked at was the student's ability to generalize the skills that they do have. So once they have a skill, what are they able to do with it? Are they able to use that in different settings and places and with different individuals? So not just can I come to school and count money on a worksheet, but can I go to the store and count money when the cashier asks me to pay for something?
We do find definitely with this population that a lot of the teaching that is proven to be most effective with students on the spectrum is very structured teaching, and it can sometimes be so structured that they're only learning things in that very specific way in that very specific class, or with that very learning that just this is a phone and not anything else is a phone. So that speaks to, again, sort of the level, the amount of teaching and the level of support that they need to be able to generalize it across. And that also speaks to teaching practices too, and not just the sort of on the student's end. The next one we looked at is one I think every team looks at. We just wanted to make sure we capture it in this document, which is demonstrates appropriate classroom behavior. That can mean a lot of different things, but we do know that students that emit really high levels of disruptive behavior, regardless of their disability identification, tend to move towards more restrictive environments. We know that this population of students diagnosed with autism can be very rule governed and like to follow the rules and can be easily your best students. But when those inappropriate behaviors occur, it can make it very difficult for them to learn and for other students around them to learn. So we wanted to try to capture what this particular student is that we were talking about, how well they follow those classroom routines.
And just to touch on your point that that can be kind of general. I think part of our hope in drafting the document as a guidance document was that we start to get some consistency in defining these skills, so that one teacher doesn't say, oh, the student works independently. Well, what does that mean? Because what that means to one teacher may mean something different to another teacher, so that when they go into a new classroom or a new building, the new building doesn't get that student and say, wait, I thought you said they could and they can't, but that we're consistent in our thinking as we prepare students for transition. So another skill that we looked at was the social behavior and group skills, just even looking at, do they engage in parallel play? Do they are they able to reciprocate and take turns in conversations, and how they interact with their peers? So much of learning in the classroom today centers around group instruction and working as a team, and even in our work life as we get older, it's a critical skill to have.
And it's a way to make sure that the team in whatever environment the student is placed in that especially this is the secondary guidance document. There are so many opportunities for social interactions as you move up through middle school and high school with all the clubs and groups and activities, that these are taken into account and built into the student's day and built into their educational opportunities. A big one for our population, and one that, although it's towards the bottom of the list, sometimes heads up a lot of the IEP meetings, and why IEP meetings are called, is how well does the student transition between activities? Some students can do really well in a very specific setting, but if you get up and go to the library, or if you try to go on a field trip, or you're taking them someplace, they engage in very high levels of tantrum behavior or property destruction. And that can really limit their ability to be in less restrictive environments. And they almost by definition end up in more contained environments. So making sure that we have plans in place and that we're addressing this from the get-go, from when the students get into the school division. And so we're working on it year after year after year, so the student can enjoy as much freedom as possible is really important.
So that was the draft that we came up with, and we are working on piloting it right now and sending it out to the schools just as a guidance document to help frame their conversation as they look at the continuum of services for students with autism.
Yeah, we want to thank you for joining this webcast. We wanted to give you an opportunity to see what the process looks like when a school division partners up with the Autism Center. The amount of time that we have from when we started this to today is a little bit under 3 years. So it's I wouldn't say it's a time-consuming process. It's a very deliberate process where we engage the stakeholders all the way across the division and in the community to try to come up with solutions that really genuinely improve the lives of and the educational processes of the children on the spectrum. And it is through these kind of partnerships, I think, that we can really see lasting, systematic, and systems-wide change. So make sure you go to VCU-AutismCenter.org for more information on what's specifically happening in Henrico and a lot of the other initiatives that we're engaged in.